Imagine a world on the brink. Tensions between superpowers escalate and the air is thick with uncertainty. The stakes are higher than ever before and every decision carries the weight of potential disaster. Misunderstandings fester and diplomacy falters. The once hopeful dialogues now turn into heated arguments and the bridges of communication begin to crumble. Suddenly, the unthinkable happens. A blinding flash, a deafening roar, and the world is forever changed. The sky darkens, and the ground trembles as the devastating power of nuclear weapons is unleashed. This is the grim reality of nuclear war, a scenario we must confront to understand its profound consequences for each of us. The immediate aftermath is nothing short of apocalyptic, with cities reduced to rubble and countless lives lost. We often perceive nuclear war as a distant threat, something confined to history books and disaster movies. The images of past conflicts and fictional portrayals create a false sense of security, making us believe it could never happen in our time. However, the potential for such a catastrophe remains a stark reality in our world. The modern arsenals are more powerful than ever, and the geopolitical tensions are just as volatile. The consequences of nuclear war extend far beyond the initial blast radius, reaching every corner of the globe and impacting every human life. The environmental fallout would be catastrophic, with radiation spreading across borders and affecting ecosystems for generations. This is not a tale of fiction or fantasy, but a call to understanding. It is a stark reminder of the fragility of our existence and the delicate balance that sustains life on Earth. It is a call to recognize the fragility of our existence and the shared responsibility we bear in safeguarding our planet. The path to peace is not easy, but it is essential for our survival. It is a call to action, to ensure that the horrors of nuclear war remain confined to the realm of imagination. We must come together as a global community to advocate for disarmament and to promote dialogue over conflict. Only then can we hope to secure a future free from the shadow of nuclear devastation. Nuclear war, in its simplest terms, is the use of atomic weapons. These weapons derive their power from the splitting of atoms, releasing unimaginable amounts of energy in an instant. The result is devastation on a scale never before witnessed in human history. The initial explosion of a nuclear weapon generates intense heat and light, vaporizing everything in its immediate vicinity. This is followed by a shockwave that flattens buildings and pulverizes infrastructure for miles around. But the horrors of nuclear war do not end there. The real nightmare unfolds in the aftermath. Radioactive fallout composed of invisible particles contaminates the air, water, and soil. This invisible killer spreads far beyond the blast zone, carried by wind and weather patterns, poisoning anyone and anything in its path. For those living in major cities or near military installations, the onset of nuclear war would be swift and merciless. The very fabric of their daily lives would be torn apart in an instant, leaving no time for escape or preparation. The blinding flash and searing heat would be the first signs of annihilation, a harbinger of the devastation to come. This initial burst of energy would be so intense that it would ignite fires and cause severe burns to anyone caught in its path, followed by the crushing force of the blast wave. This wave would travel at incredible speeds, obliterating everything in its path, turning buildings into rubble and sending debris flying through the air like deadly projectiles. Buildings would crumble, bridges would collapse, and entire landscapes would be reshaped in an instant. The very infrastructure that once supported life would be dismantled in mere moments, leaving behind a scene of utter chaos and destruction. The lucky ones would perish quickly, spared from the prolonged suffering that would follow. Those who survived the initial blast would face a grim reality, their lives forever altered by the catastrophe. Survivors would emerge into a world transformed, a desolate wasteland shrouded in smoke and ash. The air would be thick with the smell of burning, and the sky would be darkened by the lingering clouds of debris. Injuries would be widespread, burns would be commonplace, and medical facilities would be overwhelmed or non-existent. The sheer number of casualties would render any remaining medical aid insufficient, leaving many to suffer without relief. The immediate aftermath would be a fight for survival, a desperate search for food, water, and shelter in a world on fire. Communities would be forced to band together, scavenging for resources and creating makeshift shelters amidst the ruins. But the true extent of the disaster would only become apparent in the days and weeks to come. As the initial shock wore off, the long-term consequences would begin to unfold, revealing a world forever changed by the horrors of nuclear war. One of the most insidious aspects of nuclear war is the threat of radiation. Invisible to the naked eye, odorless and tasteless, radiation silently wreaks havoc on the human body. Exposure to high levels of radiation can cause acute radiation sickness, leading to a range of debilitating symptoms and often death. But even low doses of radiation, accumulated over time, can have devastating long-term consequences. Cancer rates would skyrocket, birth defects would become commonplace, and generations would bear the genetic scars of nuclear war. The environment itself would be poisoned, with radioactive particles contaminating food and water supplies for years to come. The invisible killer would know no boundaries, respecting neither borders nor ideologies. It would spread silently and indiscriminately, a constant reminder of the folly of nuclear war. Section 5. A Shroud of Winter. Beyond the immediate devastation and the lingering threat of radiation, nuclear war would trigger a cascade of global climate effects, plunging the planet into a state known as nuclear winter. This phenomenon is not just a theoretical concept but a scientifically backed scenario that could spell doom for life as we know it. The massive fires ignited by nuclear explosions would release millions of tons of soot and smoke into the atmosphere, blocking out the sun and causing temperatures to plummet. The sun, our primary source of warmth and energy, would be obscured by a thick veil of smoke, leading to a dramatic drop in global temperatures. This prolonged period of darkness and cold would have catastrophic consequences for agriculture. Crops would fail, forests would die, and the very foundation of our food supply would be jeopardized. The lack of sunlight would halt photosynthesis, the process by which plants produce food, leading to widespread agricultural collapse. And the planet's ability to produce food would be severely compromised. Supermarket shelves would empty, and people would struggle to find even the most basic necessities. The scarcity of food would lead to widespread hunger and desperation. Mass starvation would become a grim reality, affecting millions, if not billions of people worldwide. The humanitarian crisis would be unprecedented, with long lines for food aid and crowded refugee camps becoming common sights. The delicate balance of Earth's ecosystems would be thrown into disarray, leading to widespread extinctions and the collapse of entire food chains. Aquatic life would suffer immensely and terrestrial animals would find their habitats uninhabitable. The planet we call home would be transformed into a hostile and unforgiving environment. Cities would be abandoned, landscapes would become desolate, and the Earth would no longer be a nurturing cradle for life, but a barren wasteland. Section 6. The Collapse of Order. In the aftermath of nuclear war, the fabric of society as we know it would unravel. Governments would collapse, communication networks would crumble, and the rule of law would be replaced by chaos and desperation. The basic necessities of life, food, water, shelter, and medical care would become scarce commodities, leading to widespread panic and social unrest. Mass migrations of desperate survivors would overwhelm neighboring countries, straining resources and exacerbating tensions. The international order, already fragile, would collapse under the weight of the catastrophe, leaving a world teetering on the brink of anarchy. The very values that define our humanity, compassion, empathy, and cooperation, would be put to the ultimate test in a world struggling to survive. Section 7. Scars on the soul. The physical and environmental consequences of nuclear war are undeniable, but the psychological and emotional toll would be equally devastating. Survivors would be haunted by the trauma of witnessing unimaginable destruction and loss, the guilt of survival, the grief of losing loved ones, and the constant fear of an uncertain future would leave indelible scars on the human psyche. Mental health issues such as PTSD, anxiety, and depression would become widespread. The social fabric, already frayed by the catastrophe, would be further strained by the psychological wounds inflicted by nuclear war. The human spirit, though resilient, would be tested to its very core. The world after nuclear war would be a world forever changed, a world grappling with the ghosts of the past and the uncertainties of the future. Section 8. A Plea for Peace. The horrors of nuclear war are not inevitable. They are a choice, a path we can choose to avoid. The power to prevent such a catastrophe lies not in the hands of governments or military leaders, but in the hearts and minds of ordinary people around the world. We must raise our voices in unison, demanding an end to nuclear proliferation and the abolition of these weapons of mass destruction. We must hold our leaders accountable, urging them to pursue diplomacy, dialogue, and peaceful resolutions to conflict. We must educate ourselves and future generations about the devastating consequences of nuclear war, fostering a culture of peace and understanding. Every act of kindness, every word of compassion, every gesture of peace brings us one step closer to a safer and more just world. Section 9. Our Shared Destiny. The future may seem bleak when we contemplate the horrors of nuclear war, but we must never give up hope. The human spirit is capable of great resilience, compassion, and innovation. We have the power to choose a different path, a path of peace, cooperation, and shared prosperity. Let us embrace our shared humanity, recognizing that we are all interconnected citizens of this fragile planet. Let us work together to build a world where the threat of nuclear war is relegated to the history books, a world where future generations can inherit a legacy of peace, not destruction. The choice is ours, and the time to act is now. Let us choose wisely for the sake of ourselves, our children, and the future of humankind.